Welcome to Ask Psych Sessions with Marianne Lloyd, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. If you have a question or an idea for a conversation, please visit bit.ly/Ask Psych Sessions. That's bit.ly/Ask Psych Sessions. All one word, all lowercase. And here's our next question.
Thank you for joining us. Today's guest is Dr. Sean Bates from Chico State. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. It's my first podcast, so I'm excited.
Well, and I believe you are our first neuroscientist type, so that was partly why I wanted to have you on here. I realized that I haven't been representing the discipline fully. So could you tell the listeners a little bit about your research background? What sort of courses do you teach? And I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Chico State, so a little bit about what that place is like.
What Chico State is like? Sure. So my research background, I study adolescent drug use. That's broadly what I study. And more specifically, I'm interested in the long-lasting ramifications of adolescent drug use, but also the environmental factors that contribute to it. So when I first got my start in the neuroscience field, I was interested in looking at when I gave adolescent rats ketamine, how they responded when they were adults. And I found out that I gave a group of adults ketamine and tested them when they were older. And actually ketamine affected adults more than adolescents, which surprised me because there were other drugs where ketamine other drugs that didn't affect adolescents as much as adults, but then there are also drugs where they did affect adolescents more. And there's, in general, anecdotally, we know that if you use a drug in adolescence, you're probably going to be more likely to develop a problematic substance use disorder in adulthood. So it was interesting to see that wasn't the case for ketamine, at least in my experiments. Then I went to Texas A&M, where I stuck with adolescent drug use. But I was interested in how social housing conditions affected the response to morphine. And so there I found that if adolescent mice were housed in a cage where all of the animals received morphine, that they responded more to morphine than adolescents that received morphine in a cage where half of their cage mates didn't receive morphine. So there's something about being in an environment where all the other animals were receiving morphine that changed biologically how they felt about morphine. And so that led me to want to then try and switch it up and look at the stress response. And so I did a postdoc at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I studied the role of the locus coeruleus in the prefrontal cortex in response to stress, and looking to see if there were differences between males and females. And so that's kind of the research. But then when I was given the opportunity to start my own research program, I always knew that I was going to focus on drug use and drug exposure in adolescents. And so now my goals are to continue along those paths that I started, but try and add the stress component to it. So looking at stressed mice to see if that changes how they respond to drugs. And I imagine that it will. And so then teaching, where did I get started in teaching? I guess actually the first time I taught was when I was an undergrad. I went to Cal State Long Beach, and I was in a program called the Learning Alliance, and I was a peer mentor there. So I team taught a freshman success course with 3 other peer mentors, and I love the fact that I got to be in front of the class, but then also that I was able to develop relationships with the students. And even so, this happened I did it in 2005 and 2006, and I I still keep in contact with some of the students that were freshmen in that class. And so, but I never really thought that being a faculty member was something that I would be able to do. To be honest, the faculty always seemed, I mean, just like when you're younger and you see your teacher at the grocery store, you're like, oh, wow, they eat food too. Like it was kind of like that for me as a college student. The faculty just seemed like, oh, they have a doctorate and they're in front of the class. And even though I was in front of the class, it still seemed like something that was unattainable. But then when I went to graduate school, I realized, okay, maybe that's something I could do, because I had the opportunity to teach research methods. And I really enjoyed that too. And actually, I loved my research project in graduate school. I loved it. And I'm planning to keep doing things similar. But my favorite parts of graduate school were teaching students in the classroom and teaching students in the laboratory. And so it was there that I was pretty certain that I wanted to, folks were thinking about what we were going to do after our postdocs, because just about everyone that I was in graduate school with did a postdoc. And it was there that I knew I want to pursue a career at a predominantly undergraduate institution like Chico State is. And so when I was a postdoc, I was steeped in the research, but I was lucky enough to find a teaching opportunity at Bryn Mawr College, which is a small liberal arts college that was about 20, on a good day, somewhere like 30, 45 minutes from Philadelphia. And so there I taught an event seminar on drug abuse to upper division undergraduates. And that really solidified it for me. And so I knew that so I started to look at the job opportunities. And when I saw that Chico was hiring, I knew that I had to go for it, because I'm a Chico State, I'm not Chico State alum, I'm a Cal State alum. I did a bachelor's and a master's at two different Cal States. And so I knew that the system was something that I wanted to have my faculty career in. So I was very fortunate that the opening, that it came open, but then I was extremely lucky that I was chosen for the role. So more about Chico State. Chico State it's part of the Cal State system. So there's 23 universities in the entire system. And it's in Northern California. So it's about an hour and a half north of Sacramento. And Chico is considered to be a rural town, but Chico itself feels more suburban. But around Chico, there's a lot of like almond orchards and walnut orchards and rice fields. And so there's a lot of agriculture around Chico. Chico is the largest city in California north of Sacramento, and there are about, I think, something like 90 plus thousand people here. I think that's including the students. There's about 17,000 students on campus. And while it's a predominantly undergraduate institution, Chico State, like all the Cal States, also have master's programs. So I'll also have the opportunity to teach master's level courses. And I'm in the psychology department, as you probably know, because with the podcast, but I'll have the opportunity to teach graduate courses and potentially be a thesis chair for a master's student, like I was when I was at Cal State San Marcos.
Great, thank you. I really like hearing how people ended up realizing that they love teaching. And it sounds like your job has a nice balance where you're going to get to do a lot of that, but still carry on some of this interesting research. So I have a question just about kind of teaching neuroscience, biopsychology type courses. Feels like they might be a hard sell for students, and there might be some uncertainty, anxiety, maybe just flat out not wanting to be there, but have to be there. So
disdain.
Yes. Maybe some disdain. So sort of how do you manage that in the classroom? And do you feel like you're able to do some conversion to this part of psychology?
So you're absolutely right that there are biological psychology, which is the course that one of the courses that I teach. It's an upper division course, but it's almost like the first level of behavioral neuroscience in the courses in the psychology department. It's required to graduate with a psychology degree here. And most students, when I do a survey at the beginning of the semester asking students, some fun things like, tell me something boring about yourself. But then I also ask, like, what's your background in neuroscience and what are you excited to get out of the course and how can I help you be successful in the course? And many students say that they're terrified because, the biology part and one of the reasons that they became psychology majors may have been to get away from that. So what I try to do in order to convert the students is make sure, because I know for me, what converted me, because it was similar at Cal State Long Beach where I had to take, it was called physiological psychology when I was taking it, but I had to take it to graduate with my psychology bachelor's. What helped me was when I really started to understand just how steeped everyday behaviors were in the underlying biology, the underlying mechanisms in the brain and the nervous system, but more specifically for me, the brain. So what I try and do is make sure that every time I teach a lesson, whether it be vision or even whether it be the cellular mechanisms in the brain and how neurons work, I try and make sure that I associate that with an everyday behavior. So it's easy, or something that the students are familiar with. So it's somewhat easy to do that when we talk about psychopharmacology, which is something that I'm very passionate about anyway. So I can talk about how drugs and even, drugs that are more illicit, like heroin, but even drugs that people use all the time, like caffeine, how that works in the brain. And when I talk about withdrawal, I'm like, many of you have experienced withdrawal if you used to drink a lot of caffeine and you tried to stop and you realize that, I don't feel very good that day that I try not to drink caffeine. When I talk about neurons, I try and talk about reflexes, and even at the spinal cord level, that those neurons were absent from the brain. And so I try to make it associated with things that they know already. And then I also try to talk about, I try and make it exciting by talking about the fact that a lot of the topics that I'm teaching about, we only understood those because of like the scientific method, and a lot of that we still don't even know a lot of the answers. Sometimes students ask me questions and I'm like, we don't really, like yesterday a student asked me about the glutamatergic hypothesis of schizophrenia, just like maybe there's not enough glutamate, or the primary excitatory neurotransmitter, in patients with schizophrenia. And I told her, like, this is what I know, but there's a ton that I don't know, but there's also a ton that nobody knows. So there's all these aspects of that are still open for debate. And I say all the time, like, if this is something, because I know that's how I got here, if this is something that interests you, then you can be at the forefront of these discoveries. Again, I know that when I was in the class all those years ago, I don't need to say how old I was, but it was when biological or physiological psychology really transformed me as a college student. I used to sit in the back of the class, and I wasn't a bad student. Because my parents let me know that you need to do well enough to at least graduate, because that's just what they expected, and I didn't want to disappoint them. But that motivated me to start to talk to my professors and to start to spend more time listening. And so even in or it's not listening, but reading ahead of time, because even in the classes that I didn't care that much about, I wanted to do well in them so that I could get into graduate school. So I remember just following my physio professor from the classroom to his office, just asking him all these questions. And he would say, I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. And so I do that now, because it was him telling me, I don't know, made me say, well, maybe I can find out. Not that I'm going to solve all these questions, because I'm only one person, but it is really what excited me to want to even dive into the biopsych literature. And so, and even so, and then the introductory class, so when students do tell me that they are worried about it, then I also encourage them, come to my office hours. I try and be as approachable as I can, and I say we can talk about these things, and I can help you to understand it better. I try and give them study tips, like especially now in the virtual realm. I say, when you're studying for the exams, light a candle or something, and then when you take the exam, light that same candle, because we remember things better when there's an olfactory component or an emotional component too. So then I just try and one, make it as relatable as I can, but then also tell them that I understand that it's difficult and we can work through it together. I encourage them to make study groups, and I encourage them to work with the the TAs, and go to the tutor center, things like that too, that find ways to make it more digestible too. Because I understand it is very complicated, and I tell them that many of the things I still don't know that well, but I have more of a background because I've been studying this for over a decade now, and I don't expect them to be at that level. And students typically get out what they put in too, I find. I was talking to a student yesterday, and she's one of the top students, and she said, I study. And I said, well, it's working, whatever you're doing. She's doing so well in the course. And she is like, and I like it too. And I was like, well, that's good, because I don't think she thought that she was going to like it at the beginning. Well,
it doesn't get much better than that, right? Not only do they find out they like it, but that they're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can talk about one more piece. You're pretty new to your role. This is quite a time to take on a faculty role.
Mm-hmm.
A lab. It doesn't seem like your research is very... can't do a Zoom appointment with a rat or a mouse, as you mentioned earlier. So what are you doing? What are you planning? Are you hoping to have undergraduates in the lab? Kind of set the stage for what it's like to be a brand new neuroscientist on the tenure track.
So
starting right now.
Right now. So you're right. I just started in August. I guess July. I started prepping in July, and because of that, all of my courses are new preps. Even the ones that aren't new are new preps. I teach a upper division seminar, which I have taught before. Well, kind of, and I thought that was not going to be as involved as it is. It's just still very involved. But so the first semester, and my chair, so Chico State is a teaching focused institution, right? And we operate by the teacher scholar model, so that the teacher comes first, but then there is scholar in there. And so my chair, she's a wonderful person. I'm very lucky to have her. I've heard horror stories about some chairs. And so, but she told me, because I met with her before the fall, and I said, I'm worried because I can't even start really to get things going. And she said, well, she was like, that's okay. And of course, and she said, of course, I understand. And so she said, I'm sure you have, she was like, first, the course prep's going to take a lot of work because the biopsych class has a lab component as well. And so it's been kind of weird to teach the lab component online too. I have made it mostly be neuroanatomy, and I use an online platform that the faculty member who preceded me created. But so my chair said, I understand. So why don't you spend a lot of your time working on getting your postdoc work published? And so that's what I've been doing. And I am close to having at least one of the papers from my postdoc published that I'll be first author on, along with another paper that I'll be second author on. And then soon I hope to start the second first author one. But I am still, it's been almost a year since I have been in the lab, like physically working with animals. So I am getting antsy, and as things start to progress, I've started to take more steps. So I have recruited some students, and we've already had lab meetings where we talk about what we're going to do. Right now I have 4 students. They're all juniors or seniors who are planning to take an extra year. So, because I hope to have them for at least 1 or 2 semesters, probably 2. So, so we've discussed, I've told them the plans for experiments and what their roles are going to be, that they're going to be doing the majority of it. And I just I just got my animal use protocol approved to start in June. So that means that hopefully, and again, things are progressing. And in California, so in Butte County, where Chico State is, the faculty have been able to get vaccinated since January. So I've been vaccinated for a couple months now, like fully vaccinated. And the students, everyone 16 and over has been able to get vaccinated now for, I think, a couple weeks. So many of my students are telling me that they're getting vaccinated, and the plan is to have more of a presence in the fall. So my plan is to start breeding animals in June so that by August or September, I have some animals that I can at least run pilot experiments on. I've also been procuring equipment because the lab has some equipment, but the person who preceded me didn't have as behavioral of a focus as I do. So I'm been purchasing some behavioral equipment and applying for grants. I've submitted a couple grants now. We'll see how those go. Hopefully well, but if not, I still have the startup, and the plan is to hire someone to take care of the animals, but who will also be working in the lab. And everyone's been very helpful, and I'm lucky everyone here has been very helpful, but then I'm also lucky that I have a pretty strong network of other assistant professors that I can talk to. Because I did a master's at a Cal State, my mentor, who's senior, but he's helped me a lot because he understands he understands that a Cal State's not, a Penn, or not like where I was at, or I was at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, but it's closely related to the University of Pennsylvania. And so, yeah, I've just been trying to take small steps so that when the gates open, which I think they're going to open slowly as they should, then I can start to have students there running experiments and get things going. But it's not how I expected it was going to be, and I was a little panicky last semester, but since I've been taking these small steps, I'm starting to relax a little bit. I still don't think I'm doing everything right, but I think you only learn by doing.
Well, that's a great ending note, right? We're not probably doing everything right, but we can still learn. Yeah. And I also heard you talk about, how important community is, which is one of the things I like about the, teaching community as well. And you mentioned also having work from your postdoc. So it does sound like you are making the best of a suboptimal situation, but that eventually really is what you wanted to be, which is to do some research, but do a lot of teaching. So I appreciate you spending your time with us today, and I wish you a lot of luck, especially getting that lab up and going. Take care.
Thank you. I appreciate it.